Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Entertainment Headquarters, and welcome to another review. And this one is quite emotional because this film took me by surprise just for one particular reason. The rest of this film was pretty much what you expected it to be. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Final Destination Bloodlines. That's right. The latest in the Final Destination franchise. The first Final Destination came out in the early 2000s, and it was like the new slasher franchise on the block that kind of got everyone's interest. And the great thing about Final Destination, it kind of stays within the confines of what it is. It basically knows what's written on the tin. The scenario of it, where someone has a premonition of the death in whatever circumstances they're in, plane, motorway, on a roller coaster, on a bridge, whatever it is, they have this premonition. And then they save not only their life, but a handful of other people's lives. And once that happens, they have then basically pregone Death's plan of what he believes is the order of the deaths among these people. And because of that, he sets out and kills them off in mysterious but very inventive and crazy ways. And that's the fun part of the Final Destination franchise. So let's get into Final Destination Bloodlines. So Final Destination Bloodlines is a 2025 American supernatural horror film directed by Zach Lebowski and Adam Steen and written by Guy Busick. So it is the sixth installment in the Final Destination film series. The film stars Caitlin Santa Joanna as a college student who inherits visions of previous premonitions that averted a deadly structure failure in 1968 from her dying grandmother, and is warned that death is coming for her family. So that is the huge plot twist or difference between the previous Final Destination movies and this Final Destination movie. The previous movies, basically, it picks a random group of individuals, and one of them has a premonition, like I said before, and boom, they're off to the races trying to, outsmart death. This particular movie, like it said, it starts off in 1968 during the time of this lady who has a premonition when her and her partner are about to have a meal at the newly constructed Sky Tower restaurant. She, succeeds in, getting her boyfriend out of the tower before tragedy strikes. But because of that event, this leads to her entire family, which quite frankly should not exist, now becoming the target of death. And her granddaughter, who is Stephanie, she's been having nightmares for many, many years on, the same accident that should have claimed her grandmother's life. And the great thing about this particular film is that it doesn't just deal with the same scenario in many ways of just these random people being taken out one one by one, by death. It's all about taking out an entire family. And that's the only true difference between this scenario and the previous scenarios. Instead of it being friends or school teachers or your boss from work, the entire family bloodline should not exist. So that's your uncles, your dads, your sisters, your cousins, your mothers, all are in the firing line under death's design. And that makes this film a lot more fun in terms of how they've kind of changed the pattern of how death works, but it pretty much is the same scenario as the previous movies. And there's a lot of great and creative deaths in this. Another thing that this film deals with, away from the, that it also shows you the aftermath in the continuing cycle of post-traumatic stress. So the grandmother, of course, because she dealt with this horrendous situation, she became a very, very reclusive woman, became a very, very overprotective mother. So because of her behavior, it affected her children. Therefore, it goes on to her grandchildren. So it's like a continued cycle of post-traumatic stress, and in many ways deals with how a family has to overcome that and trust one another and deal with the psychological torment of all of that. So that's another added element to this movie that we didn't have in the previous ones. And outside of that, it's the same formula, and there's nothing really new outside of that element of it to the previous ones. The great thing about Final Destination Bloodlines, however, is because the last one came out in 2011 and we're now 14 years later, it's give it this kind of fresh kind of lick of paint. And despite the formula and the change up of the patterns or who's being targeted by death, which is the only other difference, it's still the same formula, but because we've had this kind of long break since the previous one, it's kind of made it refreshing again and made it kind of appealing again. And, there's some fun characters in this. Of course, this guy was my favorite character. His death is quite a brutal and fun one at the same time, because that's what we are for, is the deaths. Each member of the family gets taken out in really inventive ways, just like you expect from the Final Destination franchise. So there's some fun part, and that's all the good elements of the movie. But now I want to get to the element that drew me to this film more than anything else, and that is the late, great Tony Todd. Now, Tony Todd sadly passed, and when Tony Todd passed, we had the Oscars. And one thing that infuriated me and makes me see that the Oscars doesn't look at certain genres of film or certain people's work in the same recognition as other actors. And he was basically bypassed and basically, wasn't mentioned or shown anything, which really pissed me off. Now, in the production and making of Final Destination Bloodlines, Tony Todd, of course, was very ill. And I think he knew, and everyone in the creative process of that movie probably knew this was going to be his last movie. So they showed him nothing but humble kindness and respect. And they gave him the opportunity to speak his mind, because he basically during the course of the movie has just a handful of scenes, but them scenes are probably the most powerful and most impactful of the movie. And I think it's even more so since he's passing. So the producers and the writers said, Tony, when it comes to your scene, just look at the camera, say what you think in character, but you're not talking to the characters in front of you. You're talking to your fans and you're talking to, you know, your family. You're talking to anybody you want to, and you're going to be able to say what you want to say in your own words to the general public, to your family, to your fans, and express how you are feeling in this time and moment. And when I seen that particular scene with Tony Todd, and he said what he said, which I'll say now, he looked at the camera and he said, I intend to enjoy the time I have left, and I suggest you do the same. Life is precious. Enjoy every single second. You never know when. Good luck. And those moments and those words in that particular scene are even more resonating, not just for him or this, you know, for what he said in character, but it has long-term lasting effects in now that we know that the Mr. Tony Todd has passed. It's even more resonating because it's his final bit of work in film. It's his final role that will ever save him, and you know, physically. And the words and the lines he said go beyond this particular movie. They resonate in life in general. And I think, especially with the area I work in, away from YouTube land, it resonated with me in a much more bigger way. And I am not going to lie, in theatres, I had tears in my eyes. And it really, really hit a chord with me. Tony Todd, beyond, you know, being a fantastic on-screen actor, he's an amazing voice actor, so his work is going to last till the end of time. He had such an amazing presence on screen. Anybody who worked with him has nothing but positive things to say. And it's a shame he's no longer with us. But going back to Final Destination, this film was more of what we are used to and more of what we've seen before within the Final Destination franchise. But because there's been that gap in that time frame, and because the change kind of how the situation works with death, it of course worked for this particular film. So if I'm going to rate this, I'm going to rate this 8 out of 10. So there we go. Let me know what you think of Final Destination Bloodlines. Let me know what you thought of the movie. What do you think of Mr. Tony Todd? May he rest in peace. And like I say, Final Destination Bloodlines, it changes the twist of you know, the scenario of how death comes after you, but it's more or less the same of what we've had before, but it feels refreshing. So with that said, please keep on enjoying your movies, keep on enjoying all things entertainment, and I'll catch us all at the next one.